Hi, everybody, and welcome to another riveting episode of the Salesforce Business Analyst Virtual Trailblazer Community Group. You're here, we're here, and we're all better for it. We're going to be talking today about strategy design techniques that every business analyst should know with the brilliant Brian Shea. But first, some housekeeping items. So the meeting will be recorded, absolutely edited, promise that 100%, and posted on YouTube. Our acceptance criteria for the day is chat, and we will do our best to keep up. Don't spam the chat. So if you have a joke and nobody got it the first time, don't repeat it 5 times. Raise your hand if you want to speak. So please don't unmute, particularly when our speakers are going. We want to make sure that they are uninterrupted until we have Q&A at the end. And again, there we have Q&A at the end. I am also going to start Q&A right now. If you guys have Q&A, please feel free to click on the little Q&A question mark thingy on the bottom and add your question, and we will address it when we can. And also keep an eye on pin posts at the top. We will do our best if somebody throws a really good comment or a URL that is useful to pin it to the top of the chat. Our agenda, introductions, then Brian's going to talk and have some good Q&A. I also threw in this little chart that I did a while ago on LinkedIn. I kind of feel like a strategist is like the evolution, like at least one version of an evolution, kind of like a Pokemon, like, you know, sometimes can like evolve into different things. And I feel like a strategist is like a version of a business analyst, like if you're like super badass BA. I'm like somewhere, I don't know, like the 75% mark I feel on there. I don't know if I'm quite strategist level, but I that's why I thought that it was important to bring this session to you guys today. And then of course we're celebrating Consulting 101 being released. Woohoo! And then we will probably fly through news and opportunities. As I do, we'll turn off the recording, give away 3 certification vouchers after a quick little quiz, as well as a book that Brian is graciously sharing on strategy. And then if we have some time, we'll do some badass BA chit chat. I'm Vanessa Grant, your hostess with the mostest, 5 times rejected MVP, independent badass BA and consultant, 15 years experience in the Salesforce ecosystem, and a whole bunch of other stuff. I mostly did that to watch Brian's face as he's laughing about that. All right, Pei, over to you. Pei? Oh, you're on mute.
I was on mute. Yes, I was just
Sorry.
like, anyway, that's okay. So this is me. I've had, quite a lot of project delivery experience. I don't want to read everything there. But I've also written some books. That's my first 2 books. And I have also just written another one. Next slide, please. Which is Salesforce Consulting 101. There you go. Which I'll talk about after today. I don't know where you grab all my pictures. I can't even remember drawing that one on the right.
I think you maybe need some documentation on all the scribbles so you can go tag them and reference them.
That is something
AI, there's got to be an agent for this.
Should be. All right, that's me. I want to jump right into Brian's intro now.
This could just be a high level one, Brian. It's just I don't want to leave you out of the slides.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Do you want me to do
Just
this?
say hi, Brian.
Hey, everybody.
Okay, it's Brian Shea. He'll introduce himself in a deeper level afterwards.
Yes.
I had my assistant do the slide, and he said that you started a podcast, but I think that was a different Brian Shea, right?
I don't, there's so many Brian Shays out there.
All right. Well,
podcast, but I'm sure the other Brian Shay's podcast is excellent.
It's on strategy, apparently. So it was like, I was like, that was a good try. All right. And now, with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and over to you, Brian.
Awesome. I am going to share, and Vanessa, I may need your help with this, or I'm at least going to ask you to confirm that
Confirmed.
You can see. All right, you can see the slides.
Yes, you're all set.
Awesome. All right, so first off, Pei and Vanessa, thank you so much for having me. Appreciate the invite, and to everyone in the group, I just wanted to say, also thanks for having me, and I appreciate what all of you all do as business analysts, making sure that our projects are actually delivering the business value and all the good stuff that we need from our projects. So I'm really happy to be here. I'm going to be talking about strategy design today. And why don't we get started? So Vanessa, your slide had tons of information about me. My slide has no information about me except my LinkedIn profile. Feel free, everybody on this, to connect with me on LinkedIn, find my stuff there. I think long story short is I run a consulting company called Shea Consulting. We started up in 2012. We do things like technology strategy, Salesforce in particular, but making sure that companies get the value that they want from their technology and now AI projects. All right, so in this session, as I mentioned before, we're going to do like 30, 35 minutes and then do some QA at the end. I'm going to be talking about strategy design. I'm going to be talking about the difference between discovery versus delivery. And I'm going to go through some kind of example techniques that hopefully give you a flavor of kind of how this stuff works. Vanessa and Pei, I'd also say, like, at any point, if there's questions in the chat, I'll probably, like, every few minutes, 5 or 10 minutes, kind of stop and say, are there any questions? So definitely feel free to, like, throw those to me at those points, or if there's something really urgent, feel free to interrupt.
Yeah, and I'll tell folks to put it in the Q&A. So it'll be in the Q&A section. That way we can kind of keep it all consolidated.
Cool. That all sound good?
Yep.
Awesome. All right, so strategy design. So I'm going to give some background before I get into what strategy design is. In 2022, Salesforce launched a whole bunch of kind of great new certifications around some of the, I'll use in air quotes, some of the soft skills around technology projects. So one of them was strategy design. One of them was the awesome business analyst certification. There was a few others. And they are really valuable. They haven't sort of gotten as much attention over the last couple of years as they did in sort of 2022 and 2023. But I think there's a ton of value, particularly in strategy design. And I think a lot of the people who have success as business analysts, architects, project leads, people throughout projects that have success, they're using a lot of these techniques. Salesforce has used this term strategy design. To be honest with you, that term is not a term that's sort of used sort of outside of the Salesforce space. There's terms like product management, there's terms like design thinking, there's other terms that are sort of more common outside of the Salesforce space, where Salesforce sort of took a lot of these techniques from these other disciplines, product management, design thinking, etc., and sort of built this strategy design tool set or technique set, and packaged it up into a really great certification. So that's kind of the background on this. And I'd say when we're talking about strategy design, really the critical thing that we're talking about is this concept of discovery. Okay, so we're talking about two things. We're talking about what stakeholders actually need, and I'll talk about what stakeholder needs are and how to define those, and thinking about how do we figure out possible solutions to those needs. Okay, so a lot of what we do in projects is around delivery. It's around, we've already identified a need, we've already figured out a sort of a high level scope, and now we're working to deliver on that, whether we're doing requirements or specs or building stuff, whatever it is. That's sort of in the delivery side of the house. And strategy design is really focused on discovery, which is sort of a different a different discipline. So for a lot of people, this feels almost like we're going into like a totally new space that they sort of hadn't been exposed to before, where they're very much in the delivery space, and now we're focused on discovery. So this concept of stakeholder needs and brainstorming possible solutions, I'm going to dig into those two concepts a little bit. So stakeholder needs are in the problem space. Okay, we're trying to figure out what the customer problem is, and those problems are fixed in the sense of the problem is that we're trying to solve. That's our target. That's what we want to be focused on. I'll talk about that fixed sort of in a second. Possible solutions are in the solution space. And when we're talking about solutions within a discovery context, we're talking very, very high level. And I'll talk about that in a second. These solutions are hypothetical, meaning that, whereas I said the needs are fixed, our solutions, until we have implemented them and validated they actually solve the problems that we're trying to solve, they're hypothetical solutions. We don't know if they're actually going to work until we've tested them and probably put them in production and validated that they actually do what we want them to do. And I'll say too, this sort of concept of a hypothetical solution, or almost thinking in terms of experiments, is something that for a lot of teams is like a really cool new way to look at delivery and look at projects. Whereas in the past, a lot of people are saying, okay, our goal is to deliver this thing. The idea that the delivery of a certain solution is kind of an experiment and it's a hypothetical thing that may or may not solve our problem is sort of a fresh new way that some people find kind of empowering when they're delivering projects. So needs and possible solutions, to make it a little bit more tangible, if our business need is increasing qualified opportunities, so increasing our pipeline, increasing the number of folks who are interested in our product or service, that is obviously, it's a problem space. It has nothing to do with a solution. There's no solution implied there, and it's fixed in the sense that that's sort of a solid thing to focus on. It's not fixed permanently. Like, we could get different priorities from our executives. We could get different priorities from the business. The business could pivot, in that problem space could change. But for our purposes as like technologists, we can look at this as sort of a fixed need that needs to be addressed. And if we think about possible solutions, there's a whole bunch of ways that we could potentially solve the problem of increasing qualified opportunities. We could do marketing campaigns. We could do opportunity automations, like within Salesforce. We could improve our sales training and skill up our salespeople. We could do product offerings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's tons of different ways we could brainstorm this. And I'm going to talk more about that brainstorming of like high-level solutions. But the important thing here is, and I'll talk about it more, is a lot of times when we're in projects, we're within one of these potential solutions that have already been defined. So like for us in the Salesforce space, a lot of times we get the scope of our project is we're going to do something with opportunity automation, and that's our scope. And it's important to not just be aware of that scope of the solution, but also be aware of what the underlying need is for the business. We're not just the opportunity automation that may be our project isn't the end, it's a means to an end. And the end is increasing qualified opportunities. So I'm going to pause there real quick. Vanessa, Pei, any questions so far?
Yes. How is it, or if any, is strategy design different from pre-sales?
So with strategy design, we're trying to figure out the problem and the best way to solve that problem, or a potential way to solve that problem. Pre-sales does a lot of sort of similar things in terms of uncovering a problem space and figuring out what the needs are. I would say if you look at these possible solutions here. There's a whole bunch. It's wide open in terms of possible solutions. I say, generally speaking, if you're in pre-sales, your goal is to make the sale, which is one of the, you're not as wide open in terms of possible solutions, most likely. So that's where they differ. But I'd say pre-sales, a good pre-sales person or team probably has a lot of these strategy design skills.
Yeah, I guess if you're selling Salesforce, you're not going to be like, hey, maybe your sales team should do more training.
Exactly. Yeah. 100%.
There's always new and interesting techniques when it comes to strategy design. Who inspires you, and where do you go to keep things fresh besides calling me?
Besides calling Vanessa and Pay, I look a lot in the product management space. A lot of these ideas and a lot of like the thinking and the new thinking comes from product management. So we're actually going to be giving away a book from that's written by Teresa Torres, who is a awesome product management consultant. There's a few other product management people that I follow that are sort of sprinkled throughout this deck. So and I am going to, at the end, share some resources. So those are the places that I get inspiration from, the people who are the leaders in this space.
2 more questions. How would you build strategy across a timeline? One usually has to balance both short-term and long-term outcomes.
Yep. Well, the first thing I'd say too, and I don't think I mentioned explicitly, is some people have this idea that like discovery is a phase and then delivery is a phase. And I would say, I'm not a huge fan of thinking of it that way. We're always trying to discover. We're always trying to figure out a better understanding of the problem space. And we're always trying to be aware of possible solutions for that problem space. So a lot of even like the next slide I'm going to show you sort of implies like a linear, okay, we do discovery, we do delivery. That's not a great way to think about it. It's more of a kind of an iterative, agile type thing.
And sorry.
Yeah. No.
And last question, is increased qualified opportunities really the need? It seems like that too is a strategy to meet underlying business need.
Yeah, 100. That is an awesome point, and it's 100% a good point. How you frame your problem is actually a strategy design technique, and getting the right framing is important because you can take increased qualified opportunities and you can bring it to something even more fundamental than that. So yeah, that's a good point. Anything else?
Not yet. Rock and roll.
Awesome. So I kind of mentioned this before, but there's 2 big categories we're talking about here: discovery and delivery. When we're doing strategy design, we're in the discovery space. Most people, I'd say when I've given this presentation in the past, most people spend like 90 to 95% of their time in the delivery space. Okay. Even business analysts. So one of the things that when I've done this before, I've gotten some questions and like even pushback on is, if you look on the right side here under delivery, we've got things like requirements. We've got things like user stories, and people are often like, wait a minute, those aren't delivery, those are discovery. And my reason for putting them in the delivery phase or the delivery category is, once we're doing requirements or user stories, oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes, we've already defined what our high-level solution is. So we already know when we're doing requirements or user stories, we already know we're doing a Salesforce project. We already know we're doing a sales training initiative. So even though with requirements and user stories, we are getting more information and we are trying to understand better with those techniques. For our purposes here, they're in the delivery phase because we've already defined like what the scope of our solution is going to be at a high level. And one other thing I will talk about is, as I had mentioned, at least within the Salesforce kind of strategy design space and the certification, it's really like in Pay, I think you and I might have actually talked about this like years ago, is it's very much set up like a toolkit or a technique kit. It's a bunch of techniques to do identifying user needs and identifying possible solutions and helping to prioritize. And there's like, I think dozens of sort of different techniques in there to do that. And to be honest with you, that's kind of a strength, probably a strength and a weakness of the way that Salesforce set it up. Like, it's cool how you've got this library of techniques, but I know some people have said it would be great to have more of like organizing principles of strategy design. And that's kind of how it's done elsewhere outside of Salesforce. But there's sort of pluses and minuses of kind of the way they've structured it. I'm going to go through a few kind of example techniques to give you a sense of how these techniques work. But I have put here a few examples. So if you look down the left side, challenge framing and how might we statements. So challenge framing is exactly what the last question about, like, hey, is increasing qualified leads, is that really the problem, or is there something else that's the problem? And challenge framing is the structure around figuring out what that problem is. So that's challenge framing. Identifying desired outcomes, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. Jobs to be done, which is a structured way of identifying customer or user needs. Idea generation, journey mapping, workshops, and there's other things on here that I'm not going to go into in detail. So that's our concept of discovery versus delivery. And a few things to call out here. First of all, everyone highlighted has a role to play in strategy and discovery. Strategy is not reserved only for folks that have the strategist in their title. It's a team sport. And as you'll see, these techniques aren't just anybody on the team can be doing these techniques, particularly business analysts. It's also worth calling out that title strategist, like in the kinds of projects that we work on, it's rare that somebody has the title of strategist. So if we waited for somebody with the title of strategist to do strategy design, in most cases, it wouldn't get done. So this is kind of on all of us to play a role in this. I don't think this is going to be a surprise for anybody, but in order to effectively participate in Salesforce work, it's necessary to understand the customer needs, not just the technology. And understanding customer needs enables us to define quality and value from the user perspective, right? The user and the stakeholder and the customer is ultimately the one that defines quality, not us. It helps us to identify priorities, and it helps us to make smart trade-offs. One of the things I want to call out here is there is something really, really powerful about knowing what the ultimate problem that we're trying to solve is. So like in our example of increasing qualified leads, when we get involved in like a complex Salesforce project, knowing that our ultimate goal is this really simple, basic, fundamental idea of increasing opportunities, qualified opportunities, knowing that allows us to make smart trade-offs throughout the project. As you know from working on projects, all these things come up in terms of unexpected, a feature doesn't work how you expected, a requirement comes up, all these different things come up, and having that North Star of what the ultimate customer need is allows us to make smart decisions throughout. Like if we're just focused on kind of what the solution is and the specifications of that solution and how it works functionally, we really miss a huge opportunity to be smart about how we prioritize things throughout the project. All right, Vanessa and Pei, any questions before I move into section 3?
We do have one.
Okay.
How important is it for these strategists to understand the basics of the technology, such as Salesforce?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So you definitely need to understand how the technology works, obviously. There's 3 things that come to mind on that front. One way that teams do that is to have someone like an architect. And a lot of times an architect does a lot of the strategy work and understanding what are the needs and what are the possible solutions. And they also understand the feasibility of what's possible with the technology. So that's a lot of times where an architect can add a lot of value. So that's one approach. Another approach is this concept. It's actually from the product management space, and it's actually from the person, Teresa Torres, who I mentioned before. I've heard her talk about this, where they have small teams of like product managers or BAs, plus a developer, plus a UX person. And that small team kind of brings together like not just the strategy side of it, but also the feasibility and technical side of it. So that's a second sort of approach to it. And a third approach, which is a strategy design technique, is the concept of prototyping or proof of concepting. And I'm not going to go into it in detail here, but if you are interested in learning more about this, there's a whole world and a whole sort of set of techniques within prototyping and proof of concepting to figure out the feasibility of, using a particular technology to solve a particular problem. And it eliminates a lot of the kind of the risk there of like thinking a technology is going to be able to do something, and then when you get into the project, you realize it can't. So those are kind of three ways to approach that. That's a really great question. Any other questions?
Nope, go ahead.
Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look at a hypothetical problem. It's similar to the problem that I talked about before. It's around like opportunity management and increasing pipeline. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at 3 really commonly used strategies, design techniques, and how we can bring those to bear to help us address this problem. So our scenario is we run a business, we run an organization, and we've got a low conversion rate in the middle of our sales process. So this is we've got leads coming in, but they're getting stuck in the middle of our conversion process. And in particular, if we look at the stages at the bottom, they're getting stuck on the booking meetings and sitting for meetings. So that's the framing of our problem. And what I want to do is I want to look at a couple of techniques for how we can define this problem better and how we can come up with possible solutions to this problem. So the first thing I want to talk about is this concept of outcomes and defining desired outcomes. So to keep it at a relatively high level, when we're talking about outcomes, we're talking about some not technology and not like acceptance criteria for a particular technology or particular solution. So I have here that technology is not an outcome and acceptance criteria is not an outcome. And this product management consultant, who's great, Jeff Goethel, defines outcomes as a measurable change in human behavior, oftentimes a measurable change in customer behavior. So if we look at our previous slide, a way that we could define our outcome for this problem is we want more of our customers to sit for sales or discovery meetings for our product. That is a change in customer behavior. They're sitting for meetings. It's measurable, and it's fundamental in the sense that we can really anchor possible solutions around that and try to solve for that in a structured way. So I want to call this out because it's important, because a lot of times we get into technology projects and we think, okay, our outcome is delivering the technology. So our outcome is delivering opportunity automation, or our outcome is finishing this project, or our outcome is the acceptance criteria on a particular feature, like the acceptance criteria of, when I close the opportunity, the probability switches to 100% or something like that. And those are all important things to do, but they're not true business outcomes. Business outcomes are a customer behavior change in the direction that we want in a measurable, tangible way. All right, so technique number 2 is a technique called journey mapping. And this is, I think, a technique that a lot of business analysts like, because it's very process oriented, which for a lot of BAs is something that's, familiar and it's already part of their tool set. But a lot of times when we're talking about business analysis, we're talking about sort of functional steps to a process. And what journey mapping allows us to do is to not just look at like functionally what are the steps of the process, but also look at the sort of softer side of these processes in terms of frustrations, thoughts, feelings, and opportunities for improvement. So if we look at this, and I apologize, it's a little small, this is Salesforce's kind of structure for journey mapping. And if you look down the left side, there's 7 elements of it. So there's phases, actions, thoughts, feelings, touch points, context, and opportunities. So phases is like the functional phases. It's something that as a business analyst, you're very familiar with. If there's a process, you understand there's steps in that process. Actions are the more detailed functional steps. So processes and actions, you're probably really familiar with. The new thing for many of you that journey mapping may bring is structure around looking at thoughts and feelings from a user perspective. So if a user is going through this process or this user experience steps, like what are their thoughts when they're doing these things? What are their feelings? Where are their frustrations throughout this? And when we do that, when we think about the frustrations, when we think about the feelings, they will raise possible opportunities, ways that we could potentially improve this, the way that we can improve this process. So as I mentioned, journey mapping, similar to business process mapping, but brings some other dimensions to it. And it's not just functional. We're dealing with intangibles like thoughts and feelings and social dynamics. One thing to call out here, one way that I think is useful to think about the power of journey mapping is if we think about a sales process and we think about opportunity management in Salesforce, if we think about it purely from a functional perspective, what are the steps in the process, we'd be missing out on intangible things. So I have this a tale of 2 users concept. If you think about 2 salespeople, one of the salespeople being somebody who's very tech savvy, really interested in new technology, wants to adopt new things, interested in AI, etc. And you've got another salesperson in the same role, but they're somebody who's not comfortable with technology. It makes them nervous. They don't want to change. They don't want to try new things. Those 2 salespeople are both doing the same things functionally. But if we look at their sort of emotional and thoughts and feelings, they're going to have 2 very different reactions to the same functional process. So doing this journey mapping technique kind of opens some of those insights up to us. And the last thing, the last technique I want to talk about is how might we statements. So how might we statements, it's essentially just brainstorming solutions, like they've given it a fancy name, but it's basically thinking about a problem that we're trying to solve as an organization and thinking about ways that we could solve it as a team and looking at kind of the pros and cons of each. So it's really just a whiteboarding exercise with a group of people virtually or in person and saying, okay, we've got a particular problem. We're trying to, let's say, increase our number of people who sit for meetings, and how might we solve this? And again, I gave some examples before where maybe it's opportunity automation, maybe it's sales training, maybe it's a marketing campaign, maybe it's new product. It could be a whole bunch of different things. How might we statements are a great way to brainstorm together and also as a group kind of have shared accountability of the direction that we're going, as opposed to we've got a problem and then one person or an executive says, hey, we're going to do a Salesforce project. How might we brainstorming allows us as a group to collectively decide on the direction we're going to go. And I had already mentioned this. There's a number of different solutions to this. There's a number of different solutions for ways that we could solve this problem, and how might we statements allows us to bring that out. A few concepts to kind of wrap up the techniques. At the end of the day, many of these techniques are just ways that we're enabling our organization to set priorities in a structured and clear way. So at the end of the day, all of these techniques are a means to an end. So I'd say with all of these, again, use them intentionally. One of the, I'd say, like anti-patterns or traps of whether it's business analysis, strategy design, whatever it is, it's somebody who's got like their favorite technique and they're like applying it everywhere, regardless of whether it's relevant. And it doesn't have kind of the flexibility or overarching sort of alignment with what we're trying to do as an organization. It's just like, feels like we're doing this technique because the person really likes to do that technique. So use these intentionally and understand the bigger context and the bigger goals when you're trying to use them. And I'd say these techniques are not just relevant to business analysts. There's also tangential or related career paths where they're really valuable. So the concept of like an enterprise analyst, sort of a business analyst that does like high level, enterprise level road mapping and planning. These techniques can be really valuable for that. And as I mentioned before, within product management, these techniques are really valuable. Vanessa or Pei, before I go into the strategy design cert, any questions?
Yes. Journey mapping piqued my interest. How often do you do it in your discovery phase compared to how might we?
Okay, yeah, I would say I do it fairly regularly. I find that there's a certain type of engagement where it's really valuable. Like if you're doing consulting and your client has sort of been doing a bunch of projects but doesn't have a great awareness of how the end user or external facing customer is interacting with your company or your organization, journey mapping can be really, really valuable from that perspective. Because when you think about it, like if you're a customer, you have a whole bunch of touch points with the company. And journey mapping is really useful to look at all those touch points. So if you're like, you know, a customer of Salesforce and you're trying to buy a new feature, like there's a whole bunch of different ways that me as a customer interacts with Salesforce. There's email, there's the website, there's talking with the sales team, there's all these different things. And journey mapping really allows us to like look at those holistically from the customer perspective. I would say in terms of how might we statements, I actually don't call them, when I do that technique, I don't call it like how might we statements, I just call it brainstorming. With a lot of these techniques, like I will say from my own perspective, when you see them in like the strategy design certification, or you see them like in a book, they're looked at as like kind of these standalone techniques that like you have like a workshop around, or you do, you know, something very focused around them. And in a lot of cases, there's sometimes where I deliver them like that, but there's a lot of times where it's less formal and it's you're using that tool as part of something else. So the how might we workshop can be valuable, but it can also be like a lighter weight thing where it's just brainstorming possible solutions to a problem. So I hope that answers.
How do you approach uncovering hidden risks or opportunities, quote unquote, looking around corners in a complex business environment where information is often siloed? There are various orgs, different product lines.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there is a strategy design technique referred to as consequence mapping, I think it's called, where you're sort of you're brainstorming about possible risks, which can be valuable. And you're not just thinking about like, what are the risks, like technology wise, but also like broader risks in terms of unintentional harm that could be caused by this initiative and that kind of thing. That's one thought. I think the other thought, it actually gets back to the question that somebody asked earlier about technical ability and different ways to understand the technical capabilities that are available. One of the solutions that I mentioned to that was sort of a cross-functional team. And I think if you have that cross-functional team of like BA or product management, technical, user experience, if you get people from those various things together and you brainstorm risks, that can be a great way to uncover various kinds of risks that you want to address. I'd say one other thing too on that is it can be really valuable to look at past projects and see where you've stumbled as an organization. Like this is kind of Scrum, Agile retrospectives kind of thing. But you know, the number of times where, for instance, like a client has done, you know, 2 Salesforce projects and the data migration piece was a disaster, you know, and they're going in to do their 3rd project and like data migration isn't on the list of risks. It's like, you know, you've done it before, you've had problems with it before. It should be on your list of risks because history says you're going to struggle with it. So, yeah, so those are a few thoughts.
This is one that I'm actually curious about as well, because I recently delivered a roadmap that was too gigantic, and then I had to kind of pare it down. So, Brian, how do you find the right balance between building a comprehensive monster system that covers a large scope and keeping the approach manageable and practical?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, generally speaking, I don't think I've ever seen a project that was where you couldn't trim the scope a little bit. So I'm always kind of pushing or pulling in that direction of like, okay, you've defined it this way. Can we narrow it further? I think that when I do, this isn't this talk, but it's another talk. And I'm actually going to give this talk at the Northeast Dreaming Conference, but around road mapping. When I do road mapping, if you look at the roadmap, it's like for the next quarter, there's a lot of detail. And then as we get further out to subsequent quarters, the detail goes down and down and down because there's less certainty around what's going to happen, right? We could start on a project, we work on it for a while, we're going to learn a whole bunch of things, whether they're positive things or negative things, positive surprises, negative surprises, and those are going to inform what we're doing further on. So I would say, think of it like that. More detail, the closer you are, and the further out, you're getting more and more hypothetical. So I'd approach it like that. Like what drives me nuts. That's not the right term. One of the things that I think is not great is you see these roadmaps that are like 6 quarters out. So they're 18 months out, and you look at the next quarter and you look at the quarter 18 months from now, and it's like the same level of detail. And it's like, there's no chance that your level of detail 18 months out is going to be anywhere near as effective on what you're going to do next week or the week after. So I'd approach it like that.
Awesome. The other two are about resources, so I'll hold them to the end.
Okay. So real quick, I'm wrapping up, but real quick, there is as I mentioned, a strategy design certification. I think it's really great. It's a great way to learn these techniques. As I mentioned, it's focused on techniques from design thinking and product management. And as I mentioned, it differs from kind of the business analysis certification. If folks on this call have that one and are familiar with it, the business analysis stuff is really focused on like functional needs, and strategy design is focused on kind of functional, emotional, and social dimensions. And if you're looking to prepare for the test, Trailhead has some great resources, which you can see here. And I think a really great way to study for it, as I mentioned, the way that Salesforce approaches this is it's very much like a toolkit of techniques. So if you want to study for it, a great way to do it is to just do like flashcards of all the different techniques. And for each technique, do like what the name of it is, what it, a brief description of it, and what the purpose of it is. Like if you look at these 24 techniques within strategy design, usually their purpose is like to figure out a problem, to figure out a need. That's one. Two is to figure out possible solutions. Or three, to like prioritize. Like that's pretty much the extent of like the purposes of these techniques. So it's like to use that as an organizing lens, that can be a great way to kind of do your studying for that test. Somebody had mentioned where I get inspiration from. I get inspiration from these people and resources that are at this this webpage. So scan the QR code, go to the article, check those out. There's just awesome community of people who are working on this stuff, and I think you'll find something great if you check that out. And then that is it. Thank you so much for spending the time with me on this. And yeah, Vanessa, Pei, if you have any questions, let's do those.
Do you have any resources for proof of concept?
You should check out the proof of concepting, or they call it prototyping within the strategy design thing. There's a whole bunch of different prototyping techniques. So some of them are more focused on figuring out like technical feasibility, right? Like, okay, we want to do this thing with Salesforce. Is it feasible the way we're thinking about it? And then some of them are more around figuring out what users need, like what the user experience should be, what problem are they trying to solve, what's important to them, what's not important to them. So those things are less technical and more like there's even techniques, I forget what they're called, like I think they're called low fidelity prototypes, where it's like you're doing either like a wireframe or even something that's like on paper where it's just a rough user experience mocked up. So I definitely check if you're interested in prototyping and proof of concepting, which are different things, but check out the strategy design Trailblazer site, and there's a lot there for you.
Awesome. I don't think that there's a prereq for it. Somebody else had asked that. And last question, any suggestions on how to balance the effort that needs to go into using these techniques, especially journey mapping, when those estimating the effort allotted to discovery time is boxed/budgeted to support a short engagement? Yeah, that is a challenge. I would say, and Pei, I think this was something that you posted or Vanessa posted or somebody posted, and I feel like we kind of got like a little thing going on LinkedIn where it's like, my thing was like, discovery is not a phase. It is an activity that you do all the time. So obviously it would be great if we had more time to do these things, but I would say even if it's not, you need to do them to be successful. Whether or not they have a line item on the project plan or not, they are things that need to happen or you will not be successful. So there's a lot of times where, you work on a project and it's like, if there's a discovery line at all, it's not enough. There are ways to incorporate these strategy design techniques throughout a project or throughout your work. All right. Thank you, Brian. Everybody give your love to Brian in the chat. Please reach out to Brian on LinkedIn. I threw his resource. Well, no, I didn't. But his strategy design resources link from the QR code is pinned in the chat. Thank you so much, Brian.
Could I just say one more thing before we break?
If you must. Fine.
All of those questions, I appreciate all those questions were awesome. All of them were awesome. I do have to do a particular shout out to whoever asked the question about the framing of the problem of like, wait a minute, is that really the problem? That was a great, super insightful question. Really great question. And that's an important part of like this work of like, wait, have we framed the problem correctly?
Kudos to Mia Whitfield then on that one.
Yes.
Who is
Big kudos.
So strategy designer in training.
Yes.
For folks that were looking for the link in the QR code, it's pinned to the chat.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much, Brian. As always, you have stayed consistent, and I always learn something whenever you speak.
It continues.
Pei, do you have slides to share?
I do, but there are 36 slides, and I have 8 minutes. So
you can go into the I expected that we were going to move into the last half hour. So
okay. Yes, I do. So I will try and be quick about it. Right. So where are you? Here you go. I'll be quick. All right. So just completed this book. This was my the most recent one, and let's go. Right. So just like everything that you know about me, I focus more on the people side of things: communication, stakeholder management, self-awareness, and personal growth. Who's it for? Anyone who's learning about consulting, if they're new. Basically, I wrote it for myself 30 odd years ago. Anyone managing consultants, any career changer, anyone who wants to know how to learn intentionally, because the focus is a little bit different than what you expect. Why did I write this? If you've been a consultant, this is what you will have noticed. Okay, it is not. It's really fun and really rewarding, but you get kind of like chucked in the deep end. You expect it to kind of like pick up things and learn things. And sometimes you may not have the most supportive environment who understands you and give you all the supports you need. So because I have made very many painful mistakes, and I still do, and I have learned from them, I thought I would kind of like compress it all and share it out. So a few years ago, I wrote this thing called the 15 Tips for the New Consultant. So this is a free ebook. Grab the screenshot. You can download it for free. I wrote it for a group of people that I was mentoring into the consulting space. All the things that you need to be aware of in order to kind of like set yourself up for success. Now, I found this out not adjacently, because those of you who know me will know I also volunteer for Samaritans. I have done so for the last 16, 17 years. I also train new volunteers. So Samaritans is a crisis phone line for those who are going through emotional distress, who might be feeling suicidal. So you can imagine a lot of conversations we have can be quite deep and intense. And it may not be for everyone who has stepped up to volunteer. So what we found is when we get them to journal their emotional journey, those who ask the really difficult questions of themselves and seek the answers are usually more able to transition into their volunteering role much easier. So I have applied that to new consultants as well. So I get them to do their own journaling, and they find it really helpful, especially since I mentioned your company may not be as, have the capacity or bandwidth to be as supportive as they could be. So this is what I found. Those who journal consistently and honestly, asking painful and difficult questions, which is like strategy design, what Brian was talking about. Is this the problem that I'm actually facing? What is it? So reframing. And so this book is actually about journaling and how a consultant can use that to address different challenges that they might have. So what I'm trying to get people to do is to learn how to coach yourself, how to ask yourself questions, to open up different resources, different avenues or options you haven't thought of. And also journaling can be also very useful when you're negotiating a pay rise, or tell your company, this is why you need to pass my promotion, because probation, this is the things that I've done, these are the things that I've learned, and these are all the reasons why I deserve that raise. So as part of this book, the other thing that I've done also is I've created some journaling artifacts. So first of all, I've created a digital journal, which is absolutely free. You can get it right now without buying the book. I use vibe coding to create a few automation on this Google Sheet. So feel free to go and mess about with it. But also the other thing is I've created a hardbound journal for those who like to use pen and paper. So very quickly, let me just talk about the key themes in the book. It centers around a consultant called Clementine, and her first year at a consulting partner called Cloudacious. And every single chapter sees her actually encountering a particular issue. So after she's joined, suddenly she's put on a project and she's not prepared. What does she do? And she pulls out her journal and she starts asking questions, and which then informs her on what she should do next. So if you are a new consultant, I think some of these will resonate with you. If you're not, this book will give you a really good idea about the kind of things that you might come across. So imposter syndrome. When we first join, we always think, how am I going to be good enough? You know, a lot of consultants seem to be very self-assured, very confident. Most of the time it's because we have gone through all the mistakes, all the, these are fake eyebrows, or kind of almost fake, all the burn, what did they call it? Walking through fire, and all these metaphors. So we've made a lot of mistakes, and so we kind of come through the other side. So we kind of, it looks like we know what we're talking about. It's just we're very good at projecting that. So what is imposter syndrome? And I like the idea of, once you kind of get there, you kind of know what to do. And so I put this together. My kids find it kind of funny. So everyone, if you're in consulting, you will eventually get your boots of stupendousness, whatever that means. It's all about trying to find your consulting identity. So I spent a lot of people ask me, what makes a good consultant? What do I need to know? What do I need to skill up on, etc.? So I spent a long time. So this particular framework I put together myself, called 4 Pillars of Excellence, which is a technical foundation, your hard skills, the clouds, and the various vertical platforms, your strategic thinking, of which we've had a very, very good session on with Brian, professional excellence. So I think about that as kind of like personal leadership. And then you've got leadership, which is external leadership, in how you manage your team in order to deliver a project that you can be proud of, your team can be proud of, and that actually delivers business value for your client or your end user. I talk about knowledge gap anxieties. With every new acquisition that Salesforce does, you can keep on feeling, this is too big. When CRM first came out, so I started in the Microsoft Dynamics universe, we have marketing, sales, and service. Kind of that was it. And then when I came over to Salesforce, it was kind of that as well. And then it started accumulating Slack and Tableau and all these new platforms. You can get very overwhelmed very, very quickly. So I talk about that. Having difficult conversations with challenging clients. I should change the word, challenging clients, how you should manage it. So there's a chapter where we have an angry client, going off on Clem and how she proposes to handle that. Burnout is something that a lot of consultants can experience if they don't manage it properly. The reason why is we usually very high pace. Projects are very intense, and when you finish, you get another project, you get another team, another problem to solve, another set of clients, technical problem, human problem, political problem, change management, resistance, and all sorts of really fun things that make consulting, that I find very rewarding. But again, if you don't manage it properly, burnout is something that can happen. So I talk about that in one chapter. What happens when you plan your workshops and it all goes haywire? How do you manage that? Ethical dilemmas. I have had quite a few in the past. What would you do if that was presented to you and there is no clear direction as to what you should do? And so I have here dilemma dinos, and sometimes you can walk the line where you think, oh, because everyone is doing it, it's okay if I do it as well. A really simple one I can say is padding your expenses. It is so easy to pad your expenses, and because everyone does that, who's gonna find out, and the customer is not going to figure it out anyway. That's just a small example. So if you cross the line for a small example, where are you gonna draw the line on a bigger example? The AI landscape, I've got a whole chapter on AI, what to do, how to manage the governance around it, and how to make sure that you are looking after your client's data, and the fact that you've got hallucination and all sorts of things. How do you manage it properly? Because it will be very easy to get sued. And I have known of a few situations where that's just blown up in a big way. So as you know, the more successful you are at being good at what you do, your reward is more complexity, more challenging things. But that's a growth of self-development. What do you do when things get more and more complex? So one of the things that happens in consultancy is you will start managing, if you work with a large GSI, global, what does it stand for now? Global systems integrator, right? Like Capgemini, where I came from, or IBM, is that you will get put on bigger and bigger and bigger projects. So what do you do when suddenly you got multiple time zone, multiple cultures, and lots of different politics? So I touch on that on one of the chapters. And so the idea is the book will help you look at yourself and your growth and realize actually that by being your own best coach, you can achieve what you want if you're honest with yourself and you ask the right questions and you answer it truthfully and honestly. So that was a very, very quick. Oh yeah, so I have this, and the cloak of the compelling and confident consultant. I introduced it in my first book, where this is Rouge. He's a graduate. So if you don't have my book on discovery, which is will set you up for Brian's talk today, you can go and get it now. So that's kind of it. Very, very quickly, I will take questions if there are questions.
I am throwing open the Q&A, but you guys can throw stuff in chat or Q&A for this one if anybody has any questions. I think the one I did see in the chat was, can you suggest a checklist of what to journal?
There are some key questions I have. So in my in the online version and in the book, I've kept it fairly high level, like the challenges that I've encountered today, key learnings, what do I plan for tomorrow, because I don't want to narrow it down, because a lot of roles are different. And so it's more a self-reflection question. Keep track of whom you spoke with. So in the book and on the digital version, I've got mentor feedback, which I think is very, very useful, which you can log. I wish I kept that, because I have had so many mentors from so many different directions and the different things that they've told me. I wish I started that. So the digital version will have a list, will have a tab for mentor feedback. I also have things like goals, what you want to achieve, and the project tracker, the kind of projects that you did, who was in your team, what were you trying to solve. So those are on the digital version. The hard copy has more self-development ones, like the challenges that I've had today, my key achievements, what I'm going to plan for tomorrow, that sort of thing. So if it helps. When you say things like pretty much every meeting with a client or vendor needs to be summarized with actions and next steps. I think that's already kind of good, but you might want to ask further questions like, are the projects I'm on serving my long-term goal of the kind of consultant I want to be based on the pillars? Do I want to be more of a solution architect, which is more business and more people focused, or a technical architect where you want to be coding and more techie? So there's actually one chapter that I didn't put there where Clem is faced with a dilemma as to which part she goes. Does she generalize, or does she the opposite of that, which is not coming to mind right now? Niche down, become a technical expert. So when you have those sort of questions, I think journaling helps you find clarity within yourself so that you can figure out what you need to do. You don't need someone telling you, hey, I think you've got really good technical skills, I think you should stay there. I think it comes better when you ask yourself and you get the kind of answers you're looking for.
I think that's all we have on questions.
Yes.
Thank you, Pei. I hope that everybody reads this book. I had the honor of reading it early on, and it felt like a warm hug from Pei as you were reading it. The way you write is full of empathy, which is more than I can say about most business books. So
thank you.
All right, I'm going to go through a little bit of Badass BA news, and then we will turn off the recording and give away some certifications, and we'll see if we have any time for some chat afterwards. But thank you so much, Pei. You can get her book on Amazon. The link is at the top of the chat. I also, if you feel so inclined, since Pei is so good about documenting our sessions, if anybody feels like promoting her book and throwing it on LinkedIn and saying all the things that you learned about it today, that would be really special. Okay, if I can figure out how to move the slide. There we go. All right, there's still free AI certs and training. I'm going to mention this every month because everybody should be getting the free certs and training. This cert's going to be $200 next year. So get your Agentforce specialist, even if you don't really want it. It's a nice, just get it. It's free. Get it. Also, I want to let everybody know, if you want to catch the replay, Pei did this really amazing. She stayed up for like 24 hours, and it was like 24 sessions on like mental health and like, neurodiversity and burnout and all sorts of really incredible things to raise money for Samaritans, which is such an amazing cause. So there's 2 QR codes, one to support Pei in donating to Samaritans, or if you want to catch the replay, she had a hashtag, so everything that's on the hashtag is on the link on the right. If anybody just kind of wants I just need a good mental health day and want to get some support in the form of LinkedIn Lives, and that big hug from Pei and everything that she does, then catch the replays on the right. Also, there's a data cloud pricing calculator that is live, which I heard is terrible, actually, but I thought was worth bringing up because, like, it's one of those things, like, everybody's talking about how do we know what Agentforce is going to cost? How do we know what data cloud is going to cost? And then I saw that Matthew Walsh put out this calculator. I was like, yay, we've got something. And then I went to a conference last week, and all the consultants I spoke to said, oh yeah, no, that was very, very good. So the search is still on, but there's something there. Heads up, it's from Salesforce. Okay. Also, I wanted to promote that we also have another book that is relevant to our interest, The Value-Driven Business Analyst, another book that I was also able to preview. And Laura Brandenburg will be joining us as a guest speaker at our group here on September 30th. So if you guys feel like checking out her book, it is not Salesforce specific, but much more business analyst specific. I actually found this book to be a really good, like, I need some ideas because I'm stuck on something, kind of a flip through read. Also, calls for speakers. I bring this up every month. I don't need to be the loudest person in this ecosystem. So please, if you want to talk about business analyst topics or really anything, but some topics, or some places that are looking for speakers. We've got Florida Dreamin', SoCal Dreamin'. SoCal Dreamin' keeps on moving, but right now, September 11th, I think I'm actually going to be doing a session with my 12-year-old on that one. So if you want to meet me in person, come to Newport Beach. Forcelandia, I don't know. It keeps on happening every month. I don't know if they're still accepting, but the form is still there. Melbourne, Australia, Dubai, Ghana, Mexico City. I know Pay's still thinking about that one. I'm still on the fence. I probably can't afford it, but I think that'd be a good one as well. Also, if you want to speak to our group, I know I've still got a couple folks to speak to as far as this goes, but please submit. I will get to you eventually. I'm sorry, I've been like, Pay can account for it. I've been like so backed up in the last, professionally speaking, for the last like month or so. All right. And on that note, thank you, everybody. Don't leave. We're giving away some vouchers, but I'm going to stop the recording and we will see you folks on YouTube next month or whenever I upload the next thing. Bye.